Hearing from children. Exploring children's experiences of parental traumatic brain injury. Alexis Stephanie Channon. A thesis submitted to Auckland University of Technology in partial fulfillment of the requirements for the degree of Master of Health Science, MHSC. 2016. School of Clinical Sciences. I. Table of Contents. List of tables. IV List of figures. B. Attestation of authorship. B. Related publications. B. Acknowledgements. B. Ethical approval. X. Definitions of terms. X. Abstract. She Chapter 1 Introduction. 1. Exploring the unseen personal reflections. 1. Context for the study. 3. Disabling TBI and rehabilitation, a family affair. 4. The patient as a parent. 4. Focus of inquiry. 5. Structure of the thesis. 6. Chapter 2 Literature review. 7. Disabling brain injury. 7. Parenting with brain injury. 8. Exploring the impact of parental TBI on children. 9. Search strategy. 11. Inclusion and exclusion criteria. 12. Data extraction, synthesis and appraisal. 13. Researcher reflexivity. 13. Primary review, search results. 14. Measuring the impact of parental ABI on children's well-being. 23. Appraising the evidence, strengths and limitations. 23. Refining the focus of the search. 25. Secondary review, search results. 26. Exploring children's experiences of parental ABI. 32. Appraising the evidence, strengths and limitations. 37. Current scope of knowledge to inform TBI rehabilitation. 39. Summary. 40. Chapter 3, Methodology and Methods. 41. Conceptualizations of childhood. 41. Methodology. 41. Interpreting children's stories. 41e. Research for children, supporting their right to be heard. 43. Children as research participants, same but different. 43. Methods. 45. Research question. 45. Sampling. 45. Recruitment. 47. Consent and assent processes. 50. Data collection. 51. Data analysis. 56. Ethics. 58. Consultation processes. 58. Privacy, confidentiality and safety. 59. Data ownership. 60. Giving back. 60. Summary. 61. Chapter 4 Findings. 62. Participant characteristics. 62. Experiences of parental TBI and altered sense of being at home. 66. The sense of being at home. 67. Changes to family cohesion and rhythms. 67. Home is a place of safety and knowing. 67. Uncertainty and fear of loss. 68. Changes to the known parent. 69. Changes to family cohesion. 73. Home is a place of rhythm and routine. 74. Concern for the non-injured parent. 77. Home is a place of togetherness and connection. 79. Coming back to the whole, altered sense of being at home. 81. Attuning and adjusting to new ways of being as a family. 81. Home is a place of negotiation. 81. Seeking harmony. 82. New knowings. 84. Taking active roles to support and reconnect. 86. Summary. 89. Chapter 5 Discussion. 91. Hearing from children, insights gained. 91. The special space experience of home. 92. The felt space of home. 92. The interpersonal space of home. 97. Renegotiating the special space of home. 100. Implications for rehabilitation. 101e. Acknowledging children as active participants. 101. Considering the special space experience of home. 103. Study strengths and limitations. 105. Directions for future research. 109. Conclusions. 111. References. 113. Appendix of poster presentation NZ Rehabilitation Conference, Nelson, March 2013. 121. Appendix B, Study Leaflet. 122. Appendix C, Study Advert. 123. Appendix D, Recruitment Proposal. 124. Appendix E, Participant Information Sheet for Parents. 130. Appendix F, Participant Information Sheet for Children. 134. Appendix G, Consent Form. 135. Appendix H, Assent Form. 137. Appendix I, Ethical Approval. 138. Appendix J, Safety Protocols. 139. Appendix K, Support Information Booklet. 147. Appendix L, Certificate of Appreciation. 148. IV. List of tables. Table 1 Primary Literature Review Papers. 16 Table 2 Secondary Literature Review Papers. 28 Table 3 Participant Characteristics. 64. B. List of figures. Figure 1 Examples of questions children asked about the study. 50 Figure 2 Thematic Overview. 66 Figure 3 Rose's Dad. 70 Figure 4 Ava's Breakfast. 71 Figure 5 Matterson climbing a tree with her dad. 88. B. Attestation of authorship. I hereby declare that this submission is my own work and that, to the best of my knowledge and belief, it contains no material previously published or written by another person, except where explicitly defined in the acknowledgments, nor material which to a substantial extent has been submitted for the award of any other degree or diploma of a university or other institute of higher learning. Signed, date the 29th of November 2016. Alexis Channon. B. Related publications. Channon A. and Kays N. 2013. Considering the impact of parental brain injury on children within the family, a review of the literature. In New Zealand Rehabilitation Conference, Connecting, Living, Rebuilding. Nelson, New Zealand, 8-10 March 2013. B. Acknowledgements. I wish to express my heartfelt gratitude to a number of people who have been instrumental to the completion of this research. First and foremost, I wish to acknowledge the children and their families who chose to give up their time and share their personal experiences with me for this study. Thank you Matterson, Tomahawk, Rose, Hardcore, Holly, Ava and Riley. I am extremely grateful for the insights you each provided, as well the lessons you gave me along this research journey. I also wish to acknowledge my supervisors, Associate Professor Nicola Kays and Dr. Tineke Water, for their guidance along this journey. Nick and Tineke, you have not only been invaluable sources of knowledge and advice, but also of support and encouragement for me throughout this project. I am extremely grateful of your ability to simultaneously nurture and challenge my thinking, which has enriched my master's experience and, I believe, the thesis itself. I would also like to extend my gratitude to those who made themselves available for early consultation regarding the project and also the organizations and individuals who assisted with recruitment. I also thank friends and colleagues at AUT University who have journeyed alongside me and been available, near and far, as a sounding board for ideas and invigorating discussion. Finally, I wish to acknowledge my family, without whom this thesis would remain an idea in my mind as opposed to words on a page. Wendy and Stephen, thank you for all the painting and reading and car playing and leaf kicking and steep hill climbing, and more, that has given me the time to write, knowing Bailey has been having adventures galore with his Nana and Grandpa. Mark, thank you for all that you've done while I've been at work, on train. Your support never wavers and I am truly grateful for all you do for me, and our family. Bailey, thank you for showing me the need to keep trying, applies as much to writing a thesis as it does to each of the skills you are working toward mastering each day. I am so grateful for your infectious giggle and your encouragement to escape the laptop for fun and play. I am looking forward to more time for adventures with you all. Ix. Ethical approval. Auckland University of Technology Ethics Committee granted ethical approval for this research on the 17th of June 2014, Ref. 14-109. X. Definitions of terms. Brain injury. The position adopted within this thesis is that acquired brain injury (ABI) refers to any brain injury caused by events after birth by, for example, stroke, aneurysm, brain tumor, or traumatic brain injury. While traumatic brain injury (TBI) specifically refers to injury caused by sudden trauma to the brain from an external mechanical force by, for example, a fall, road traffic incident or assault. Parental injury. The term parental injury has been used to describe being a parent who is living with the consequences of significant injury. In relation to the focus of inquiry, parental ABI describes any parent who is living with the consequence of ABI, and parental TBI refers to any parent who specifically has experienced TBI. Whānau is a term used within Te Reo Maori, the language of the indigenous population of New Zealand, referring to extended family, or a family group, which includes networks who are closely related, socially, economically and spiritually. While at times used interchangeably with family, the meaning of whānau is based upon a Maori and a tribal worldview and is acknowledged to be more complex than a direct translation. Walker, 2011. Where appropriate, terms relating to family and whānau, or family, whānau, have been used within this thesis to recognize the New Zealand context and its people. She. Abstract. This study explored the experiences of children living in the context of parental traumatic brain injury (TBI) within New Zealand. Brain injury can impact a person's participation in their regular social roles within the family, compromising their well-being, and the quality of life of others within the family. Available evidence emphasizes the importance in attending to the needs of adult relatives of acquired brain injury (ABI) patients who may be experiencing issues of depression, burden and loss after injury. Children living within the family context after ABI, however, appear to be overlooked. A literature review completed as part of this thesis highlighted a relatively small and heterogeneous sample of studies that have investigated the perspectives of children living in the context of parental ABI to date. Findings of these studies demonstrated children are impacted by parental ABI, experiencing a sense of shock and loss after the event, and also taking on active roles to try and support, cope and make sense of family life after injury. The current study drew on an interpretive methodology, using hermeneutics, to explore children's narratives about their experiences of life after parental TBI. Children were regarded to be the experts and gatekeepers of knowledge about their experiences. 7 children, from 5 families, chose to participate within the study. Interviews conducted with children acknowledged their rights, needs and capabilities as research participants. A range of data collection methods were used, drawing on a toolkit of interview techniques that could be tailored to the individual requirements of each participant. Both data collection and analysis were informed by an understanding of experiences lived with a focus on the life-world existentials of lived space, lived body, lived time and lived relation. The findings were constructed into themes that could provide insight into aspects of children's experiences. Analysis identified how children faced an altered sense of being at home when living in the context of parental TBI. Children's stories revealed how parental TBI impacted upon many of the taken-for-granted expectations in the home. They experienced disruption to the roles individuals performed and the ways in which their family usually interacted together with she. Changes to the presence, availability and mood of both their injured and non-injured parent. These experienced changes to family cohesion and rhythms meant children faced new and changing expectations, opportunities and constraints in their home with regard to their play, behavior and interactions with their siblings and parents. Where there were changes to usual family life, there were also responses and adaptations. Children shared examples of the accommodations they made in order to respond to the new, and at times scary, confusing and frustrating, behaviors and expectations that injury brought into life at home. They played an active role in supporting their parents and contributing to efforts to regulate family life by attuning and adjusting to new ways of being as a family. The study findings support and extend existing research on the topic, drawing attention to the impact parental TBI has on children in the home, and also their efforts to influence and moderate the impact of injury on their parents. Children's accounts highlighted the significance of home as a special space experience, which is altered when TBI intrudes on family life, introducing change and uncertainty. The work of recovery involves renegotiations of the space of home as a family. Children are actively engaged in interdependent, reciprocal relationships within the family system and their position needs to be acknowledged. Adopting a whole family approach within the context of adult rehabilitation, which includes taking notice of children, has the potential to offer support to the family as a whole, and also the possibility of enhancing recovery for the individual with TBI. 1. Chapter 1 Introduction. This study investigates children's experiences of living in the context of parental traumatic brain injury (TBI). Literature relating to recovery and adaptation following TBI consistently highlights that the impact extends beyond the injured person to their families, notably adult relatives such as spouses, parents and siblings, e.g. Kreutzer, Mills, and Marwitz, 2016, Lefebvre-Cloutier, and Levert, 2008, Marsh, Kersel, Havil, and Slay, 2002, Mouls and Chandler, 1999. However, the potential impact of TBI on children within such family systems remains largely overlooked, with their voices rarely heard in research. This study aims to give voice to those children living in the context of parental TBI within Aotearoa, New Zealand, NZ, by hearing directly from them about their experiences, understandings and perspectives of life after parental injury. This chapter provides background to the study. It begins by offering an account of the researchers' assumptions and interest in the topic. It then introduces the context for the study, discussing the impact of TBI on the individual and in connection with others as part of a family system, providing the rationale for the focus of the research inquiry. The chapter concludes with an overview of the structure of the thesis. Exploring the unseen, personal reflections. I have a long-standing interest in the rights and well-being of children and adults who experience disability. I came to rehabilitation research and postgraduate study from a background supporting disabled children and families, with a passion and belief that better outcomes must be possible. I was afforded opportunity to engage in postgraduate study, and on introduction to the area of childhood studies, I reflected upon my own understandings and interest in children and conceptualizations of childhood. I have always found children to be great company. I enjoy the fun and creativity that can be expressed through play with children. I find children great teachers and value the education working with children has given me, both about myself personally as well as life more broadly. In my experience, children can be very insightful. Their desire to learn, test and make sense of the world can open up new ways of seeing and understanding, especially the taken for granted of the everyday. My work experience has been marked by the lived experiences of children whose life worlds confront assumptions of childhood as a time of innocence and carefree certainty. I have admired the strength, resilience and fight of the children I have worked with, many of whom have faced challenges through disability, poverty, abuse or neglect. I have also been frustrated by the added fight required for children and their parents, carers in negotiating the systems and structures in place designed to offer support. Postgraduate study provided the space and resource to critically examine some of the social and political contexts that shape the environments I have worked in with children. The process of reviewing literature and critically discussing issues introduced new language, concepts and theories through which I could articulate to myself as much to others some of the questions I had been left with in practice, broadening my understandings, challenging my assumptions and generating yet more questions. Discussions with peers highlighted some intriguing differences between the priorities, expectations and constraints of practice for a range of clinicians working within rehabilitation. Unlike work with children, rehabilitation work with adults appeared more focused on the individual and the one-to-one interactions between clinician and patient. Thus, I became aware that the goal of family engagement I regarded as a prerequisite for work with children in the community was not something I could assume to be universal. Across rehabilitation practice with adults, I reflected on my own research practice, in which I was working as a research assistant on a clinical trial assessing an intervention for adults after TBI. I became aware through the assessments that the presence of children within these families was largely unseen. My visits were planned to support the participants' needs, often occurring at a time of day that held the least distractions and when the individual would be least fatigued, notably when other family members were out at work or children were at school. I also observed that although careful consideration had gone into the selection of measures that could tap into meaningful outcomes for each person, the majority relied on a deficit focus. Such measures appeared more orientated toward identifying issues at the level of the individual as opposed to looking at outcomes associated with their connections with others within their family systems. Within the more open or qualitative components of the assessments, or general conversation during the visits, Participants would share examples of the wider impact of their injury on themselves in relation to others within their lives. Such ideas were often repeated in conversations held with significant others who were also invited to participate in the research. Later, I would have opportunity to qualitatively interview adults with TBI and their significant others, adult relatives or friends, about their experiences of recovery and adaptation after injury, and once again concern for the wider impact of their injury on loved ones was a frequent topic, especially where people were experiencing issues with mood, emotional regulation and altered sense of self. Injured people also emphasized the significance of support from family and whānau members within their recovery stories. Family and whānau were described as offering a sense of purpose in recovery and contributing to the injured person's ability to adapt to life after injury. These reflections, through postgraduate study and research practice, left me questioning whether paying greater attention to children living within the context of TBI could offer new insights to inform rehabilitation practice and support families and whānau in their recovery process. I wondered what we might be able to learn from listening to children and hearing their interpretations of the everyday worlds of recovery and adaptation after parental injury. I wondered what systems and structures are in place to support children living in the context of parental TBI, and whether more was needed to ensure their well-being is safeguarded and their resilience fostered. Context for the study. When a person's life is affected by the onset of illness or injury, it does not solely impair physical function. As contemporary views of health and rehabilitation recognize, impairment affects a person's ability to engage with their environment, perform their tasks of everyday living and participate in their regular social roles. World Health Organization, 2001. The tasks and social roles people perform are interconnected with others, and as such disability becomes an experience that is shared with those around them, including their family. Rolland, 1999. 4. Recognizing that disability exists in context, therefore, is essential in the study of health and wellness after TBI. Disabling TBI and rehabilitation, a family affair. The importance of recognizing the role of family within the rehabilitation process is increasingly highlighted within international literature and accordingly is recommended as a core component of best practice for TBI rehabilitation within NZ, ACC and New Zealand Guidelines Group, 2006. The guidelines for the clinical management of TBI emphasize the need to provide information and support to family and whānau, acknowledging their role within the rehabilitation team and enabling their inclusion within care planning and goal setting. Within the NZ context, the significance of family and whānau in rehabilitation is further emphasized by cultural values. Holistic views of health seen in Maori culture regard taha whānau, family health, as a requirement to well-being. Dury, 1998. A similar view is shared by Pacific communities, captured within Ala Mo'ui, the Ministry of Health's Pathway for Pacific Well-being, Minister of Health and Minister of Pacific Island Affairs, 2010. Valuing families is a key principle, and the importance of family is recognized as offering care and support, as well as providing identity, status and honor. The consideration of such values serves to highlight the significance of attending not only to the family's central position within the rehabilitation team, but also to the patient's position and role within their family. The patient is a parent. The patient's position is a family member requiring an increased level of care and support is readily acknowledged, but their position as an individual within the family who may themselves be relied upon to care and support others receives less attention. A key role that a patient may be performing within a family is that of a parent, on whom children depend for their care and protection and for whom children reciprocate love and care. TBI characteristically affects younger adults, especially males, during child-rearing years, with peak incidence in NZ reported within the 15 to 30-year age group, ACC and New Zealand Guidelines Group, 2006. As such, many individuals with TBI may be positioned within their family context as a parent and must adjust to this role with the consequences of brain injury. 5. Little is known about the incidence of parenting with a TBI, but a report from the UK indicated 32% of people surveyed with TBI had dependent children under the Age of 18 years, Stillwell, Holly, Stillwell and Davies, 1997, as cited in Edwards, Daisley, and Newby, 2014. Furthermore, there appears to be limited consideration of the combined impact of parenting and TBI, with little literature on the topic and a lack of targeted rehabilitation supports. Morris's, Wright, Smith, Roser, and Kendall. 2013. From what is known, discussed further in Chapter 2, Literature Review. Individuals appear to struggle with their parenting roles after acquired brain injury, ABI, feeling both physically and emotionally absent from their children, and stress the need for more rehabilitation focused towards supporting family life. From a family systems perspective, Rolland, 1999, in order for rehabilitation to offer such support to parents after TBI, it must recognize the intertwined nature of the injury, individual and family life. Rolland emphasizes the need to look beyond a focus solely on the individual and their condition, and instead address the interface of any chronic condition and the family. p. 243. The model recognizes that the health and well-being of individual members of a family has the potential to compromise the healthy functioning of the system as a whole. Also, importantly, from a strengths-based perspective, that the family system and reciprocal relationships offer a significant resource post-injury, with potential for resilience, building and growth. Accordingly, as members of a family system, children form part of the rehabilitation context, and consideration of their needs and influence is a necessary part of looking at recovery and adaptation after TBI. Yet, as will be demonstrated in the succeeding chapter, there is a very limited pool of evidence focused on children living in the context of parental TBI. This research study aimed to respond to this greater need for understanding about children's experiences after parental TBI. Focus of inquiry. Positioning children as active agents of their lives and the gatekeepers of their life stories, this study worked with children to explore their perspectives of life after 6. Parental TBI and address the research question, what are children's experiences of living in the context of parental TBI? This research aims to add to knowledge of children's understandings and sense-making of life after parental TBI. Data was collected through interviews tailored to the needs of the individual child, using a toolkit of data collection methods. Data was analyzed using a hermeneutic lens to explore the meanings of children's constructed accounts. By exploring children's accounts in this way, this study aims to offer insights into their lived experiences after parental TBI for those working to support families after brain injury. Structure of the thesis. Chapter 2, Literature Review, will offer a critical review of the current state of knowledge relating to children's experiences of living in the context of parental TBI. It will present a comprehensive review of the literature, appraising the evidence and offering a rationale for the current study. Chapter 3, Methodology and Methods, will introduce the underpinning theoretical perspectives guiding this research, including the positioning of children as active agents of their lives. It will provide a rationale for the methodology and methods selected, detailing the approaches used for recruitment, data collection and analysis. The chapter will offer a robust account of the ethical considerations made throughout the design and application of this study. Chapter 4 Findings will present the key ideas that children shared in relation to their experiences of living in the context of parental TBI. Children's quotes will be offered to support the themes presented and to ground the discussion within the data. Chapter 5 Discussion will discuss key study findings in relation to the reviewed literature. Extending the hermeneutic lens toward the application of findings, it will consider the meanings of children's experiences for the context of rehabilitation practice. It will identify the study limitations and offer suggestions for further research. 7. Chapter 2, Literature Review. This chapter provides a summary of literature relating to children's experiences of parental TBI. It opens with discussion of the known impact of TBI on individuals and their adult relatives and considers the role of parenting after ABI. The chapter then offers a critical review of available evidence, identifying, appraising and synthesizing study findings, looking first at literature exploring the impact of parental ABI on children and then at studies exploring children's experiences. The chapter concludes by considering the current scope of knowledge available to inform rehabilitation policy and practice within NZ. Disabling brain injury. TBI is a leading cause of disability internationally, affecting thousands of New Zealanders each year. ACC and New Zealand Guidelines Group, 2006, Feigen et al., 2013. Following TBI, individuals can experience a range of persistent difficulties in physical, cognitive and emotional functioning, impacting their participation in previous social and employment roles. Lefebvre et al., 2008. This disabling impact of TBI serves as a predictor for low quality of life after injury. Von Steinbuchel et al., 2010. Rehabilitation interventions are often designed to maximize quality of life after injury, aiming to optimize an individual's participation and well-being and reduce stress on the family. Wade, 2005. For a person with TBI, restriction in participation of normal social roles in the family can compromise well-being and in turn, can affect the quality of life experienced by other members of the family. It is recognized that adult relatives of injured individuals are at risk of adverse consequences to their own health and well-being, with emotional difficulties, including depression and burden reported. For family carers after the brain injury, Lefebvre et al., 2008, Marsh et al., 2002, Moules and Chandler, 1999. Symptoms frequently inherent in brain injury, such as changes to personality, behavior and emotional affect coupled with heightened levels of agitation, aggression, depression and/or social withdrawal can be particularly challenging for carers to manage. Furthermore, the change in relationship that occurs with the adoption of a caregiving role can be further compounded by financial strain and reduced social support that result from the injury. Report Coleman, and Hanks, 2002. Parenting with brain injury. Studies that have explored the experience of parenting after ABI have found the injured person's impairments and perceptions of their competencies impact their ability to cope with the demands of parenting. Edwards et al., 2014 found parents with ABI were worried about the impact of their impairments on their children, felt a loss of equality in their parenting roles and experienced difficulties in finding ways to contribute as a parent, feeling like an absent parent. p. 1703. They felt a loss of the roles they would normally play within their children's lives, being both physically and emotionally absent. This was also a theme shared in Kitzmüller, Asplund, and Hagstrom 2012, who explored the lived experience of families of stroke survivors and described the sense of absent presence felt by parents after brain injury. In both studies, participants were reported to have negative perceptions of themselves as parents, with a reduced sense of competency. Similar accounts were also evident in interview discussions with fathers with ABI, including TBI, who described a sense of failure in their parenting roles. Morrises et al., 2013. Injured fathers were described as struggling with the demands of parenting, with physical and cognitive impairments limiting their abilities to participate in everyday activities with their children. This led to frustrations and stress, contributing to family tension. For those participants who sustained their injury while already in parenting roles, they struggled to recall or implement previous parenting knowledge and skills. They had lower tolerance levels and were quick to get angry, which resulted in the use of ineffective strategies, including punitive measures, and increased frustrations. The non-injured parent often needed to intervene, which at times led to more stress or feelings of failure on the part of the injured parent. The combined impact of the resulting impairments of the injury, together with environmental changes, such as loss of work, impacted participants' sense of identity and how they perceived themselves as parents. Morrises et al., 2013. It was observed that their negative perceptions of their parenting roles had an impact on the whole family system. The additional demands and burden placed on the functioning of the family created stress, with the non-injured parent taking on an increased sense of responsibility for the family. The participants' accounts in Morrises et al., 2013, stressed a need for more rehabilitative guidance in terms of their parenting roles, and emphasized the importance of family life, and family support, on recovery. Kitzmüller et al., 2012, captured the idea that interviewees regarded family as a life buoy, and were essential to survival and recovery after ABI. Family relationships were described as supporting a will to live when facing severe post-stroke depression. Similar accounts were shared in Edwards et al., where participants emphasized that knowing they had a role to play in their children's future was a motivating factor in recovery, as was being supported to be able to actively participate in their children's lives. Edwards et al., 2014. Parents valued seeing their children's growing strength and resilience through their recovery. Equally, they acknowledged the important role their children played in supporting and encouraging them, as one participant remarked, being with his children had a profound effect on my mental world. p. 1705. The participants' accounts highlighted the potential rehabilitation support that could be harnessed by attending to a patient's role as a parent, and children's roles within the family, in order to aid recovery after ABI. They demonstrate that the goal of maximizing quality of life would benefit from focusing beyond just the individual, or independent living per se, and instead consider the person in their context, looking at others with whom a patient lives in connected, interdependent ways. Exploring the impact of parental TBI on children. In considering connectivity and interdependence, it becomes necessary to look at the impact of parental brain injury on children also. Where there are injured and non-injured parents needing to adjust to the impact of disabling TBI on family life, including their changed capacities as parents, there are also children needing to cope with such changes in relation to their position as children within the family context. A child's position within a family is dynamic and variable, shaped by the culture of family life, as well as society more broadly. Children depend on the adults in their lives for their care and protection. They are positioned with less power than the adults around them and are directly impacted by any decision-making that affects the adults within their lives. Ministry of Social Development, 2002. As a consequence, rehabilitation policy and practice targeted toward the injured and non-injured parent has the potential to, inadvertently, impact upon any children within the family context and contribute to their position of vulnerability. Therefore, consideration of the needs of the injured and non-injured parent must extend to the child living in the context of parental TBI. Studies considering the impact of parental illness or impairment on children have to date been predominantly concerned with the relation of childhood risk and resilience to future health outcomes in adulthood, marginalizing their experiences as relevant only to the role children will serve as future adults in society. Gladstone, Boydell, and McKeever, 2006. The review offered here purposefully set out to understand what is currently known about the impact of parental TBI on children currently living in the life stage of childhood and adolescence, recognizing its importance as a period of life in its own right. Effort to explore the impact of parental TBI on children needed to recognize the complexity of childhood experience, acknowledging children's agency as well as vulnerability. Children are not only vulnerable and shaped by their experiences, but are also actively involved in shaping their worlds, through their thoughts, actions and the roles they hold. Alderson, 2005. Children contribute to family life and take on reciprocal roles of love and care towards their parents and others in the family. Greater understanding of the roles that children play in the family context after parental TBI, including the ways they may themselves seek to impact life and support the family, could offer unique insights to aid the development of rehabilitation practices that meet the needs of the whole family during recovery and adaptation after injury. The literature review for this study intended to identify the scope of the current literature base considering parental TBI from children's perspectives. However, preliminary searches highlighted a very limited pool of studies specific to parental TBI, with the majority including a broader sample of parental ABI. As such, the inclusion criteria were extended to include parental ABI more broadly in order to gain understanding from children living in closely comparable contexts. 11. The literature search was undertaken in 2 stages. As background to this master's study, a literature review 1 was undertaken to explore the impact of parental ABI on children. Primary review. This literature search was repeated and updated for inclusion within this thesis. Secondary review. The primary review attempted to capture the breadth of literature available on the topic and therefore sought to include all original research, regardless of methodology. On the basis of the primary review findings, the secondary review was more targeted toward qualitative evidence to reduce heterogeneity to enable synthesis of findings in a meaningful way, and b. because qualitative papers were considered to be more explicitly relevant to the focus of inquiry for this study, with its aim to explore children's experiences of living in the context of parental TBI. The same systematic search strategy was applied to both the primary and secondary review. Details of the selection and appraisal processes, alongside inclusion criteria, are outlined below. The findings of each review are then presented in turn. To avoid unnecessary duplication, discussion of the primary review findings offered below focuses on the included quantitative studies rather than the full data set of quantitative and qualitative studies originally included. The secondary review then offers a synthesis of findings across qualitative studies. Search strategy. Both the primary and secondary search drew on principles of systematic review to guide the definition of key terms for the search strategy, with consideration primarily focused on the population, children, intervention, variable of interest, parental ABI, and outcome impact components of the PICO framework. Shart, Adams, Owens, Kites, and Fontello, 2007. Initial scoping of literature showed there was limited consistency between studies in the terminology used to describe the concept of parental ABI. This was problematic within databases and search results, which were rarely able to distinguish between the parent and child as the individual with ABI. To aid the search process, proximity search restrictions were used alongside Boolean phrasing. The scoping searches demonstrated that when the results of the primary review were presented to a rehabilitation audience at the NZ Rehabilitation Conference, in Nelson, 2013. See Appendix A for a copy of the poster. 12. Using proximity searching, the variable of interest component, i.e. parental ABI, was efficient in generating results, making terms relating to population and outcome redundant. The population concept of children was already encapsulated within the idea of parent, and terms relating to impact proved to be too variable to assist the search. Search strategies were adapted according to the database requirements, using phrases such as TBI N5 parent *OR TBI N5 mother *OR TBI N5 father *. The online searches were conducted within EBSCO Health databases and Scopus primary search in 2012, secondary search. In 2016, inclusion and exclusion criteria. Articles were required to be 1. Published in a peer-reviewed journal. 2. In English. 3. Reporting on analysis of original data relating to children living in the context of parental ABI, exploring the impact of parental ABI on children, primary review. B. Children's experiences of parental ABI, with data collected directly from the child, secondary review. The definition of children living in the context of parental ABI purposively sought evidence in relation to children currently in the life stage of childhood and adolescence, and therefore studies referring to retrospective experiences of grown-up children were excluded. The definition, however, was intended to capture the complexity of the context for children, and therefore study participants were not required to be physically living with the injured parent for inclusion. Finally, it was recognized that a paucity of literature may exist on the subject matter, therefore no additional exclusion criteria were applied and a wide publication timeframe, from 1990 onwards, was used. Article titles and abstracts were reviewed to determine potential eligibility, and where this provided insufficient detail, full-text copies of the papers were sought. In addition, supplementary hand-searching of included articles' reference lists was used to highlight any further relevant papers. Where no full-text copy of the Article 13 was available in English, the reference was excluded on the grounds that it could not be screened, which is recognized to be a potential limitation of the search process. Data extraction, synthesis and appraisal. After the initial screening process, each selected article was read in full, to confirm eligibility. Data relating to the general characteristics of the study was extracted into a spreadsheet, specifically, study location, aims, focus of inquiry, theoretical perspective, methodology, methods, ethics, participant details, main findings and conclusions, guided by principles from the Joanna Briggs Institute 2008. In addition, review comments were added in relation to the critical appraisal, conclusions that could be drawn and relevance to the review question. A process of diagramming was used to capture and explore key ideas reported across studies. To aid data synthesis, articles were appraised on the basis of the paper's methodological position. Ultimately, the primary assurance sought was that the specified aims of inquiry could be supported through the selected methodology and subsequently by the methods chosen for data collection and analysis. All papers were appraised to consider the congruence between the stated aims, presented findings and conclusions drawn. Qualitative papers were assessed for internal consistency and rigor, seeking a transparent account of the methods employed and sufficient support of findings with raw data. Ballinger, 2006. For the papers using quantitative methods, reliability and validity of results was considered in relation to the study design and the appropriate reporting of statistical data, seeking clearly defined significance levels, sufficient description of measures used and statistical tests applied. Researcher reflexivity. Throughout the review process I was mindful of my own pre-understandings that I brought to the process of data extraction, synthesis and interpretation. Alongside my skills and experience as a qualitative researcher, I also bring experience of supporting families living with disability and personal understanding of growing up in a family with experiences of serious illness. As such, I kept a reflective 14. Journal is a space to record developing understandings, explore pointerstandings and critically reflect on the topic. Primary review, search results. The results from the primary review highlighted a relatively small, n equals 12, and heterogeneous literature base in terms of methodological approach, scope and purpose. One notable limitation of the search was that 3 potentially relevant studies could not be retrieved as full or translated texts and therefore could not be reviewed for inclusion. Oppenheim-Gluckman, 2011, Oppenheim-Gluckman, Marioni, Chambry, Ashbacher, and Graindorge, 2005, Erbach, Senenkler, and Colbert, 1994. Broadly, the sample of studies captured 3 clusters of work aiming to 1. Explore children's experience of parental ABI, Butera-Prinzi and Perlas, 2004, Charles, Butera-Prinzi, and Perlas, 2007, Harlow and Murray, 2001. Harris and Stewart, 2006. 2. Measure specific outcomes related to children's psychological and physical health. Kiefer Christensen, Teasdale, and Billenberg, 2011. Pesser, Code, Lynn, and Willer, 1993. C. Meyer, and Visser-Miley, 2010. Eisel, Hibbard, Robillard, Papadopoulos, and Jaffe, 1998. Van de Poort, Visser-Miley, Post, and Lindemann, 2007. Visser-Miley, Post, Meyer, Moss, et al. 2005, Visser-Miley, Post, Meyer, Van de Poort, et al., 2005, and 3. Generate Theory of Children's Coping After Parental ABI, Moreno-Lopez, Holtham, and Adi, 2011. While the studies offered universal agreement that parental ABI appears to impact on children, the breadth of approaches adopted across such a small sample of literature made the synthesis of study findings challenging. Taken as a whole, the reviewed evidence underscored the importance in considering children in the context of parental ABI, with research from all 3 areas of work offering insight into the impact on children. However, the lack of consistency across reviewed studies in terms of theoretical and methodological positions created difficulty in drawing meaningful interpretations from the data as a whole, with contrasting or largely unclear philosophical or theoretical 15 underpinnings directing a wide range of research. Other authors have drawn similar conclusions, T.R. and Dumas, 2015, and highlighted the potential benefit of a unifying conceptual model for drawing conclusions across study findings. As detailed above, T.11, the refined search strategy, within the secondary review, takes account of this finding by focusing on studies with more closely aligned epistemological position, looking at the qualitative evidence. Therefore, discussion Here we'll focus on the quantitative studies, listed within Cluster 2 above, which sought to measure outcomes related to children's well-being after parental ABI. A summary of the reviewed quantitative studies, including study aims, design, findings and critical appraisal, is offered within Table 1 below. 16. Table 1 Primary Literature Review Papers. Included paper study aims theoretical perspective. Participant information data collection methods. Reported findings critical appraisal. Kiefer. Christensen et al. 2011 Denmark to explore children's post-traumatic stress symptoms, PTSS, and psychological functioning after parental ABI. Not stated N equals 55 families with at least one child 7 to 14 YRS. Parental ABI. Group N equals 35. Families less than 5 years. Post-injury. Comparison. Group Diabetes. N equals 20 families. Less than 5 years post. Diagnosis. Self-report measures, child and adult children found to be at risk of developing PTSS following parental ABI. Almost half of children of parent with ABI, 46%, had significantly elevated levels of PTSS compared to 10% of children within comparison group. These symptoms were underreported by parents. Parents of children within ABI group reported more behavioral, emotional problems for their children than standardized norms, but not significantly different from comparison group. Strengths, consistency between aims and study. Design, methods, standardized measures used, Danish versions available, child self-report measures used, inclusion of data. Comparison group in addition to published norms. Culturally representative normative data available, i.e. for Danish population. Limitations, sampling, small. Sample size, potential sampling bias, restricted inclusion criteria, only 2 parent families were included. 17. Included paper study aims theoretical perspective. Participant information data collection methods. Reported findings critical appraisal. Pesser et al. 1993, USA. To explore the effects of parental TBI on children's psychological functioning and behavior. Not stated N equals 24 families. Parental TBI, 16. 84 months post. Injury. Self-reports, adults only, negative behavior change was reported for most children and this was correlated with reduced parenting performance of both parent with ABI and the spouse. Depression in the non-injured parent was seen to be associated with poorer outcomes for children. Strengths, consistency between aims and study design, methods. Limitations, sampling, family defined as married. Couple only, data collection and measures, children's perspectives not sought in most self-reports relied on proxy reporting of non-injured parent in relation to parent with ABI, non-standardized measures, use of measures, subscales of self-reports used in isolation, determination of substantial change on measures not clearly accounted for. 18. Included paper study aims theoretical perspective. Participant information data collection methods. Reported findings critical appraisal. See et al. 2010 Netherlands to explore early risk factors for long-term stress in children after parental stroke. Not stated, although. Analysis. Underpinned by stress theory. Longitudinal study. N equals 29 families, 44 children. Parental ABI, 3 years post-stroke. Self-reports, child and adult. Children's reports of elevated stress correlated with child's gender, girls more at risk, and parent. Reports of depressive symptoms and marital dissatisfaction. Strongest correlation observed for depressive symptoms reported by parent with ABI. Strengths, consistency between aims and study. Design, methods, standardized measures, clear description of use of measures and their reliability, validity, child self-report measures used. Consideration of ethics demonstrated. Longitudinal study, cross-reference of data available for T1 entry. To rehab T2, 2 mths after discharge of rehab T3, 1 year post-stroke T4, 3 years post. Stroke explanation provided participants excluded, lost to follow-up at this time point T4. Limitations, sampling, small. Sample size, participants excluded on basis of marital breakdown, data collection and measures, marital dissatisfaction only measured for spouse, crude measure of functional disability used. 19. Included paper study aims theoretical perspective. Participant information data collection methods. Reported findings critical appraisal. Eisel et al. 1998, USA. To explore parenting skills of individuals with TBI and their spouses. The effects of parental TBI on children. The effects of parental TBI on levels of depression. Not stated. N equals 32 families with at least one child, 7-18 years. Parental TBI N equals 16 families, mean time post-injury 9.3 years. Comparison group, parents without TBI N equals 16 families. Self-reports, child and adult. Children of parent with TBI experienced more symptoms of depression than comparison groups, as did parent with TBI. No difference is found in terms of children's behavioral problems between the two groups. Children perceived non-injured parent is less involved in parenting and both parents as having more lax control. Strengths, consistency between aims and study design, methods, inclusion of comparison group, perspectives of child sought. Thorough reporting of measures used, with clear use of data to support findings. Limitations, sampling, small. Sample size, restricted to two-parent families where child living at home. No distinction made regarding parents whose TBI predated parenthood. Limited. Description of method of data collection and ethical considerations, especially in relation to the inclusion of children. 20. Included paper study aims theoretical perspective. Participant information data collection methods. Reported findings critical appraisal. Van de Poort et al. 2007 Netherlands to explore caregiving, behavior problems and stress in children 3 years after stroke. Not stated. Longitudinal study. N equals 29 families, 44 children, 10-21 years. Parental ABI 3 years post-stroke. Self-reports, child and adult. Most children supported their parents with care and mobility tasks, 66%. Reported increased responsibility, 72%, and maturity, 81%. Some behavior problems reported for children. High stress in children was associated with female gender, as well as depression, limitation in activities of daily living and life satisfaction of the parent with ABI. Strengths, consistency between aims and study design, methods, majority of measures used were standardized, child self-report measures used. Part of longitudinal study, some comparative data available from earlier time points, CC et al., 2010. Limitations, sampling, small. Sample size, limited explanation given regarding participants lost to follow-up from prior study, Visser-Miley et al., 2005. Data collection and measures, non-standardized measure. For perceived benefit, measure did not distinguish between no change and negative change, not all. Measurement data presented, discussed, no comparative data for stress or some patient measures. 21. Included paper study aims theoretical perspective. Participant information data collection methods. Reported findings critical appraisal. Visser-Miley, Post, Meyer, Moss, et al. 2005 Netherlands to explore, support given to children. During inpatient rehabilitation after parental stroke, what determinants predict children's adjustment 2 months after discharge? Not stated. Longitudinal study. N equals 55 families, 77 children, less than 18 years. Parental ABI, less than 6 mths post-stroke. Self-reports, child and adult. Half of children received support defined as 1 or more consultation with rehabilitation staff member or attending full-day therapy. Support children received During parents' rehabilitation was related to parents' disability, but not health status or behavioral difficulties children were experiencing. Children's health and psychological functioning related to the health of the non-injured parent's level of depression and strain. Strengths, consistency between aims and study. Design, methods, majority of measures used were standardized, child self-report measures used. Part of longitudinal study, baseline data available for study of correlations. Ethical processes reported. Limitations, sampling, small. Sample size, inclusion criteria limited to children with two-parent families only. Data collection, crude measurement of support from rehabilitation staff. Children's perspectives regarding need for support not ascertained. Measures for parent with ABI primarily focused at impairment level, e.g. depression not measured. 22. Included paper study aims theoretical perspective. Participant information data collection methods. Reported findings critical appraisal. Visser-Miley, Post, Meyer, Van de Poort, et al. 2005 Netherlands to explore changes in children's functioning, including depression, behavior and health 1 year after parental stroke. Which factors can predict course of functioning? Not stated. Longitudinal study. N equals 71 children, number of families not specified in follow-up study. Parental ABI, 12 mths post-stroke. Self-reports, child and adult. Improvements were observed in children's functioning at 1 year post-stroke compared to data at admission to rehabilitation and 2 months post-discharge. Children's functioning at the start of the rehabilitation served as a predictor for functioning at 1 year post. Levels of depression and non-injured parents' perception of relationship also served as predictor for children's functioning. Strengths, consistency between aims and study. Design, methods, standardized measures, child self-report measures used, ethical processes reported. Limitations, sampling, small. Sample size, inclusion criteria limited to children with two-parent families only. Outcomes measured. Data collected for parent with ABI primarily focused at impairment level, e.g. depression not measured. Asterisk papers refer to different time points of same longitudinal study. 23. Measuring the impact of parental ABI on children's well-being. All included studies measuring the outcomes relating to children's psychological and physical health provided findings that suggested children might be at risk of their own adverse health outcomes and called for more attention to support their needs. Multiple areas of impact were reported across studies, with findings that children living in the context of parental ABI displayed behavioral difficulties. Pesser et al., 1993, Van de Poort et al., 2007, Visser-Miley, Post, Meyer, Moss et al., 2005, Visser-Miley, Post, Meyer, Van de Poort et al., 2005, Elevated stress. C. et al., 2010, Van de Poort et al., 2007, Depressive symptoms, Eisel et al., 1998, Visser-Miley, Post. Meyer, Moss et al., 2005, and Increased levels of PTSD symptoms, Kiefer Christensen et al., 2011. However, there were some conflicting findings between studies regarding the type or degree of difficulties experienced as well as the role of injured parent and non-injured parent outcomes as predictors for child outcomes. Some studies indicated the injured parent's level of impairment or depressive symptoms was associated with greater risk of negative outcomes in children, e.g. Pesser et al., 1993, Van de Poort et al., 2007, but others found no significant correlation between these variables, e.g. C. et al., 2010, Visser-Miley, Post, Meyer, Moss et al., 2005. Greater consistency was shown across studies between children's outcomes and those of the non-injured parent. A number of studies showed the non-injured parent's scores of depressive symptoms, experienced strain or perception of marital relationship predicted issues relating to child's mental health and behavioral issues. Pesser et al., 1993, C. et al., 2010, Visser-Miley, Post, Meyer, Moss et al., 2005, Visser-Miley, Post, Meyer, Van de Poort et al. 2005. Appraising the evidence, strengths and limitations. The quantitative studies were able to offer insight into the potential risk for children in terms of the outcomes captured across studies. However, due to the lack of theoretical basis guiding most of the research, it is difficult to determine whether the issues selected for measurement are the most meaningful or 24. Important to study either from a conceptual basis or from children's own understandings and experiences. Furthermore, a wide range of outcomes were assessed across the studies. It was positive to note that many studies sought data directly from children using self-report measures, but some level of proxy reporting for both the child and injured parent was evident across studies. Finally, a number of studies used non-standardized measures. Using standardized measures would not only have offered greater assurance of the validity and reliability of results obtained, but also would have provided more opportunity for comparison between studies using the same measures. A number of other design limitations were consistently noted across studies that restrict the generalizability of findings. Sampling issues appeared across many studies, with small sample sizes, reliance on convenience sampling, and restricted inclusion criterion noted. For example, many studies had narrow definitions of family, restricting who was eligible for inclusion, e.g. two-parent households or married couples, and those measuring change over time also excluded families where parents had since separated or had secondary injuries. See et al. 2010, Vandeport et al. 2007, Visser-Miley Post, Meyer, Moss et al. 2005, Visser-Miley Post, Meyer, Vandeport et al. 2005. While strict exclusion criteria offers control to the experimental design, it limits the applicability of study findings across the population as it does not reflect the lived reality of families after ABI, who are known to experience relationship issues when living with the consequences of brain injury. Kreutzer et al. 2016. Significant associations were found across studies, with some findings, such as the impact of non-injured parents' well-being on children's outcomes, repeated across studies and providing direction for further exploration. However, in general, there was still a lot of unaccounted variance within reported data. Many studies were cross-sectional, limiting ability to draw causal inferences from the data. Furthermore, it is possible that pre-injury variables may account for some of the variance, but capturing meaningful pre-injury data is a challenge inherent in this type of injury research. Some studies did make effective use of comparison groups, such as the inclusion of families diagnosed with diabetes within the last 5 years. Kiefer Christensen et al. 2011. This allowed for useful exploration of the significant differences noted in measured outcomes between different populations. 25. While etiology of brain injury, and timeframe post-injury, was a factor of some designs. For example, the studies by Visser-Miley et al. Looking at children's adjustment to parental stroke, other studies did not have this as a focus of interest, e.g. making no distinction if brain injury predated parenthood or occurred in the child's lifetime in Eisel et al. 1998, and therefore did not explore the potential impact of these factors on children's outcomes. Knowledge of whether the ABI predates the child's birth or has occurred in their lifetime, as well as the type and severity of injury, level of ongoing impairment and time since injury, are potentially salient issues that could be useful to inform rehabilitation practice. As it stands, studies were not able to offer much insight into how these factors accounted for variance within findings, and so potential differences relating to, for example, the cause of injury and associated population characteristics could not be explored. As a whole, the quantitative studies related to a relatively small body of work in a small number of children, with 4 of the 7 publications referring to studies discussing the same group children at different time points. See et al. 2010, Vandeport et al. 2007, Visser-Miley Post, Meyer, Moss et al. 2005, Visser-Miley Post, Meyer, Vandeport et al. 2005. Studies examined populations with cultures and healthcare contexts quite different from NZ, being conducted in Denmark, the Netherlands and USA. When looking at supporting domestic rehabilitation practice through the application of evidence-based practice, caution must be taken to consider the differences that may exist due to the political context of healthcare, as well as cultural factors. The health disparities that exist for Maori and Pacific populations within the NZ context emphasize the need for cultural competence at all levels of health care practice, which includes the application of evidence-based practice in brain injury rehabilitation ACC and New Zealand Guidelines Group. 2006. Refining the focus of the search. The results of the primary review emphasized the need for a more robust theoretical base for research aiming to explore or address the impact of parental ABI on children. As such, the space for more inductive exploration of the topic was highlighted, providing the potential to gain greater understanding about children's 26 experiences and possible areas for future study, including areas where measurement or intervention may be best directed. As indicated above, P.11, an updated review, secondary review, was undertaken, refining the search criteria according to epistemological assumptions of this thesis. With specific consideration of the positioning of children and the type of knowledge sought as evidence. The secondary review specifically acknowledged children's agency, placing value on their knowledge and ability to offer their own perspectives of the meanings they construct from their life experiences. Christensen and James, 2008, Doherty and Sandalowski, 1999. Therefore, it prioritized examination of the findings from qualitative studies, aiming to gain understanding of children's constructions of their experiences and sense-making, from their perspectives. Once again, studies were appraised for their strengths and limitations, and ideas found across studies synthesized. Secondary review, search results as outlined above. P.12, Scopus and EBSCO health databases were searched for. Peer-reviewed qualitative literature. Papers were required to be available in English language and published from 1990 onwards. All results were subjected to the revised screening process, and were required to report on qualitative data, collected directly from the child, about their experiences of living in the context of parental ABI. Potentially relevant articles were retrieved for full-text review. The primary review identified 5 qualitative studies relating to children's experiences of parental ABI, and the secondary review identified an additional study. After the refined criteria had been applied, with a particular focus on qualitative studies exploring children's own constructions of their experiences. 2 papers were excluded on the basis of ineligible data. The studies were excluded as the data was not sourced directly from the child, having been collected from a parent and clinician, Harlow and Murray, 2001, and, within a mixed methods study, from families, within an intervention, Charles et al., 2007. Therefore, in total, 4 papers were deemed eligible for inclusion. All 4 sought to gain understanding of children's experiences in the context of parental ABI. 1. Was a pilot study conducted with children prior to therapeutic intervention. Butera, Prinzi and Perlas, 2004. 1 interviewed children with PTSD symptoms. 27. Kiefer, Christensen and Johansson, 2013. 2 were focused on adolescents, exploring their experiences. Harris and Stewart, 2006, and the role of social support. Moreno Lopez et al., 2011. A summary of the reviewed qualitative studies, including study aims, design, findings and critical appraisal, is provided within Table 2 below. 28. Table 2, Secondary Literature Review Papers. Included paper study aims. Theoretical perspective. Participant information data collection methods. Reported findings. Critical appraisal. Butera, Prinzi and Perlas. 2004, Australia, to explore children's experience after parental ABI. Phenomenological framework. N equals 4 children, 7. 12 years. Parental ABI, 2 to 4 years post-injury. Semi-structured interviews. Observations. Self-report measures. Child and parent without ABI coping and adjustment following parental ABI. Was challenging for children, especially in relation to parental personality and behavioral changes following ABI. Measures did not reveal clinically significant concerns, but risk factors were indicated. Some positive coping strategies reported. Strengths, stated aims supported by methodology, data gathered over extended timeframe, 6 mths. Limitations, methods appear incongruent with methodology, use of measurement data. Inconsistent with philosophical perspective. Some ambiguity between focus of inquiry as research study versus case report from clinical intervention. Limited. Discussion methods of interviewing children. Some use of supporting data for identified themes, but limited, and sources of data not clear, i.e. interview versus clinical observation. Limited. Description of ethical considerations. Sampling. Non-diverse sample, all families seeking counseling. 29. Included paper study aims theoretical perspective. Participant information data collection methods. Reported findings critical appraisal. Harris and Stewart 2006, South Africa to explore adolescence. Experience after parental TBI. Phenomenological framework, specifically. Existential phenomenological psychology framework, N equals 4 adolescents, 17-19 rupees. Parental TBI, 1.57 years post-injury semi-structured interviews. Adolescence experience. Was unique, they felt sense of responsibility for their parents' parentification, as well as a sense of guilt. Experienced initial shock, fright, loneliness and isolation, self and family, changes in family, including sense of loss, and financial implications. Participants also experienced positive meaning-making, seeing positive changes in themselves, including maturity. Strengths, aims of study, philosophical perspective and methodology clearly stated. Internal consistency demonstrated. Some diversity within the small sample. Thorough consideration of ethics provided. Limitations, limited use of data to support themes. 30. Included paper study aims theoretical perspective. Participant information data collection methods. Reported findings critical appraisal. Kiefer, Christensen and Johansson. 2013, Denmark to explore the experiences of children showing high levels of PTSS after parental ABI. Phenomenological approach. N equals 14 children, 14 years. Parental ABI, less than 5 years post-injury, mean 3.5 years, semi-structured interviews children experienced several losses at different stages after parental ABI, which were suppressed or neglected by children and their parents to protect injured parent. Themes related to initial fear of parental loss, feelings of estrangement from others who did not understand their situation, increase in chores and responsibilities, dealing with a changed parent, and coping mechanisms. Children were regarded to take an active role in trying to preserve the family system after parental ABI. Strengths, aims of study, philosophical perspective and methodology clearly stated, internal consistency demonstrated. Clear description of methods, including content of interview guide and process of analysis. Limitations, sampling only interviewed children showing high levels of distress after parental ABI, on basis of high scores on measure of PTSS. 31. Included paper study aims theoretical perspective. Participant information data collection methods. Reported findings critical appraisal. Moreno-Lopez et al. 2011, UK. To build a model of adolescents' response to parental ABI. Positioned between positivist and constructionist epistemologies as a critical realist, using grounded theory methodology. N equals 6 families, 9 adolescents, 20 years, 6 parents. ABI 16 to 49 months post-injury semi-structured interviews, a model of the process of coping presented. Highlighted a process of initial shock, increased protectiveness by adolescents, sense of increased maturity and the role of social support in offering stability, connection to life before parental ABI, including extended family and peers. The findings highlighted the importance of the non-injured parents coping on family functioning and the supportive role that offspring have within the functioning of the family unit. Strengths, philosophical perspective, methodology and methods, including analysis, aligned and clearly described. Internal consistency demonstrated. Use of theoretical sampling. Clear description of interview schedule provided, themes and generated theory supported. With use of data and participant feedback sought. Thorough consideration of ethics provided. Limitations, homogeneous sample of participants, n equals 9. Including data from only 6 families, including 3 sets of 2 siblings. Exploring children's experiences of parental ABI. The qualitative studies offered some rich descriptions of children's experiences in the context of parental ABI. In synthesizing the study findings, some key themes emerged that underlined the importance in considering children's position within the family after brain injury. Descriptions of children's accounts emphasized the wide-ranging impact of the injury and the array of emotions children reported feeling in the context of parental ABI. Reading across studies, ideas that seemed to repeat included experiences of shock and fright of the event, loss, challenges in dealing with changes in the injured parent and impact on relationships, support, receiving and providing, active coping and sense-making. A summary of these ideas is presented below, incorporating related literature where relevant. Key observations made during the appraisal process are also highlighted. 3 studies described the experienced shock and fright of the event children felt at the time of parental ABI. In Kiefer Christensen's 2013 study, they found the children they interviewed not only had vivid memories from either witnessing or learning about their parent's injury, but also of seeing their parent injured in hospital. They recounted feeling scared, despite maintaining a calm appearance, and worrying their parent may die. Similar ideas were observed in the studies with adolescents who were reported to find the aftermath of ABI a frightening and uncertain time. Moreno-Lopez et al., 2011, p. 1227, with a participant in Harris and Stewart, 2006, explaining that immediately after the accident, and in the early period of recovery, she recalled feeling numb. p. 50. Moreno-Lopez et al., 2011. Suggested that support, especially from extended family, during this period helped young people manage their daily lives and regain a sense of normality. Across studies, participants indicated that the level of support typically changed over time, with support often reducing after the crisis period of parental injury. The theme of experienced loss was common across all studies. The losses children experienced related to the changes they reported observing in their injured parents' behavior, personality and emotional affect, as well as changes in their relationships with their injured parent and non-injured parent, and others. In the reviewed studies, the changes brought about a range of mixed emotions, with children feeling happy and grateful that the parent they loved and cared for had survived, while also experiencing sadness, anger and frustration toward their injured parent and the changed ways they interacted with them and others around them. The children's accounts were aligned with themes of loss and identity change seen in qualitative literature exploring the lived experience of recovery after TBI, where injured people themselves report a sense of disconnect with their former selves and social world. Levick, Case, and Fatal, 2010. Similar reports have been noted in studies looking at couples' relationships after TBI, where the theme of loss is equally apparent, with people experiencing the loss of their own identity as well as their shared sense of self, and also their sense of connectedness with the other person. Godwin, Chappelle, and Kreutzer, 2014. In the reviewed papers, children were dealing with a loss of a person who was still present. Their accounts spoke of the fact the person they had known, or the relationship they had previously enjoyed, had gone. As these 2 participants described, "I basically just feel sad because he's there physically. I suppose I've still got a dad but he's not my dad. It's not like I remember him, he has a total personality change, that is not my dad." Butera, Prinzi and Perlas, 2004, p. 89. "For me, it is like he died, and I got a stepfather instead. This is a tough thought to have. It would have been 100% easier if he had died, then everybody would understand that he was gone. But I haven't felt I could say this to him or anyone else." Kiefer Christensen and Johansson, 2013, p. 1566. The ambiguity of the losses the children described were recognized to resonate with the theory of ambiguous loss. Boss, 1999. The framework of ambiguous loss has been applied to research and therapeutic intervention for people after brain injury. Kreutzer et al., 2016, and is useful in describing the confusion caused with the unclear loss of a loved one who is physically still present, but psychologically absent. Reviewed studies highlighted the impact of these losses on children through the difficulties they experienced in knowing how to manage their uncomfortable feelings. Butera, Prinzi and Perlas, 2004, or relate to their changed parent. Moreno Lopez et al., 2011. We have clashes because he is just a different person. P. 1227. The changes children reported in relation to their injured parent impacted on their child-parent relationship. Some participants talked about efforts to maintain positive relationships with their injured parent, for example trying to find ways to maintain or regain emotional connection with their injured parent through shared activities. A few examples were provided of positive changes children observed in their injured parent, for example improved temperament, being less stressed or home more often, which had positive impact on connectivity between child and parent. However, more commonly reported findings were that children experienced difficulties connecting with their injured parent and coping with the personality, mood and behavioral changes of the new parent. In Moreno Lopez et al.'s 2011 study, adolescents recognized the impact their parents' mood had on them and the whole family. As one participant stated, when dad is unhappy sets up a horrible atmosphere. P. 1228. Issues with reduced tolerance, quick-temperedness and aggression appeared especially challenging for participants across studies. In relation to the symptoms of increased aggression, participants in Butera, Prinzi and Perlas's 2004 study reported experiences of verbal and physical abuse in the home. While no other authors reported similar findings, it is noteworthy that the children in their study did not actually disclose these experiences in the research interview sessions themselves, but later in the therapeutic sessions that occurred over time. Their finding highlights the importance of staying vigilant to the topic of family violence, both in research designed to explore the impact of parental abuse on children and in rehabilitation. Practice with family and whānau. The review findings also demonstrated that children experienced changes to other significant relationships in their lives. Several themes across studies described positive changes in children's relationships with their non-injured parents, who were most often recognized as being their primary source of support. Children were reported to experience a closer sense of connection with their non-injured parent, who they felt united with in their efforts to work together, supporting each other after injury. There was a new sense of appreciation for family, which also extended to closer relationships with siblings and other family members who had rallied around to offer support, including, most notably, grandparents. However, there were also negative changes observed in terms of the healthy parent's behavior, stress levels and availability. In the two studies looking at younger children's experiences, authors highlighted a sense of expressed annoyance from children that their injured parent demanded so much time and attention from their healthy parent, when they had their own needs they wanted addressed. Butera, Prinzi and Perlas, 2004, Kiefer Christensen and Johansson, 2013. Across study findings, themes described children's experiences of receiving and providing support in the context of parental abuse. As indicated above, children were frequently reported to have found support in their healthy parent, siblings, and grandparents. Their support came with the shared understanding of experiences of injury, and endured over time. However, other support networks were seen to be more inconsistent and transient, with studies describing how participants felt estrangement from others who did not show understanding of their situation. Kiefer Christensen and Johansson, 2013, and experienced loneliness as a result of reduced socialization as part of the family. Harris and Stewart, 2006. Peer relationships emerged as needing extra consideration. They were relationships also impacted by parental abuse and had the potential to be an important source of support for children, especially adolescents, or alternatively a potential source of negative influence for children going through difficult times. Moreno Lopez et al., 2011. Across studies, children were seen to be selective in terms of disclosure to friends. It was an active decision and children expressed frustrations when friends did not show understanding. Kiefer Christensen and Johansson, 2013, Moreno Lopez et al., 2011. A reciprocal role of support was noted across studies, with findings showing a mutual dependence of support roles within families. Harris and Stewart, 2006. Children took on extra tasks and chores around the home, and talked about it being a natural response to support the family. Kiefer Christensen and Johansson, 2013. The support was not limited to physical tasks, and many children were reported as discussing their efforts to emotionally support the family. As described, the relationship between the child and non-injured parent was consistently raised as significant to study participants. Children demonstrated that as well as being aware of the impact of the injury on themselves, they were acutely aware of their non-injured parent's suffering. They expressed their worries about their non-injured parent, recognizing they were sad, stressed and burdened. Studies reported how children actively sought to protect their parent in order to try and reduce the stress they were experiencing, and try make their life easier. As well as remaining alert to potential stressors, children avoided sharing their own worries or stresses with their parents so as not to make them more stressed, burdened or sad. A further layer of support considered across studies was the role of information and professional input. Studies stressed that children often did not have access to information either about ABI generally or their parents' condition. Adolescents in Harris and Stewart's 2006 study highlighted that they could not always talk to their healthy parent about their injured parent's condition, as asking questions could cause further upset. Equally, they recognized at times people were trying to protect them from the seriousness of the event, but the lack of information contributed to anxieties. Similar findings have been reported in literature looking at children's experiences of parental illness more broadly. Such studies have highlighted that in the absence of appropriate information, children can become more worried and try to make sense in their own ways, at times leading to inappropriate allocation of blame with themselves. Christensen, Chalmers, and Woodgate, 2004, or their parents, Turpin, Leach, and Hackenberg, 2008, or drawing inappropriate conclusions, such as a parent only enters hospital to die, Moordock, 2010. In terms of professional input, children in the reviewed studies found staff addressed the adults and didn't seem to notice them. Kiefer Christensen and Johansson, 2013, and accordingly they were regarded to be left out and invisible. Butera, Prinzi and Perlas, 2004 p. 88. Positive examples of family engagement were also mentioned, and this was perceived as supportive to the children involved. Kiefer Christensen and Johansson, 2013. Across studies, positive ideas relating to the ways in which children actively manage their experiences by coping and sense-making were emphasized. Providing support to others, or finding someone with whom to communicate, were both seen as positive coping mechanisms. Positive relationships that were particularly emphasized were extended family, with the consistency of grandparent support being discussed across a number of studies. Children also highlighted the role family pets could play in offering a level of comfort. A commonly reported coping strategy across studies was the use of distraction. Children used play activities, as well school and leisure time, as spaces for respite and distraction, providing time out from the issues going on at home. The reviewed papers also described children's meaning-making, in which their experiences were constructed into positive narratives. Study participants talked about how their experiences had given them a new outlook on life, in which they now looked on the bright side of everything. Moreno-Lopez et al., 2011 p. 1226, and felt they must make every second count. Harris and Stewart, 2006 p. 51. Some gave examples of wanting to prioritize family more since ABI, with a new value of the time together, and also felt they had closer relationships with members of their families. Harris and Stewart, 2006, Kiefer Christensen and Johansson, 2013, Moreno-Lopez et al., 2011. Children explained that the sense of duty they felt toward their parents gave them a perspective that was different from their peers, increasing their sense of maturity. While at times this led to frustrations in a sense that others could not truly understand their position, it also provided children the opportunity to learn about their character and contributed to their developing sense of self. Appraising the evidence, strengths and limitations. The majority of the qualitative papers demonstrated rigor in terms of their stated methodology and application of methods, providing clear rationale and description of approaches taken. One study where questions of methodological congruence and ethics remained was the work of Butera Prinzi and Perlas, 2004, who combined research with a clinical intervention. The paper offered some insightful findings that aligned with the other studies and also highlighted the topic of increased family violence after parental ABI. However, questions remained over the blurred lines between data collected as pre-therapy interviews and through the intervention sessions themselves, how children assented to processes, and how the different data sources, including information from therapy sessions and from parents, were combined for analysis. Despite its limitations, the study draws attention to the need to consider the relationship between child participant and adult researcher, as well as potential benefits of collecting data over multiple sessions. The study also highlights how information gathered from parents may be useful in providing context for stories shared. All the reviewed qualitative studies sought the experiences of children who had known their parent prior to ABI, with criteria that the injury must have occurred in the child's lifetime, ranging from 1 to 7 years post-injury across studies. Where restrictions were made about families residing in the same home, this was generally limited to the period before the brain injury and so did not exclude families who had since separated. The studies still only refer to the experiences of a relatively small number of children, with all but one study, Kiefer Christensen and Johansson, 2013, drawing mainly on experience of older children from 12 years and over. Greater diversity was seen in the qualitative studies in terms of populations studied, with studies taking place in Europe, Denmark and UK, Australia and South Africa. Two of the qualitative studies purposefully sampled children or families experiencing difficulties after parental ABI. One study invited only those children showing elevated levels of PTSD to participate, Kiefer Christensen and Johansson, 2013, and another recruited families seeking family therapy, Butera Prinzi and Perlas, 2004. While it is important that children who are experiencing negative outcomes are given the opportunity to participate in research, there is a risk that a bias towards researching problems means that children coping well in similar circumstances may not be given opportunity to share their experiences. From an ethical perspective, some authors have argued that research that takes a problem or deficit-focused approach to researching children's issues risks increasing prejudice and stigma to groups of children related to the research. Alderson, 2005. Alderson argues that in order to conduct fair research, it is important to also ask children about positive aspects of their lives, exploring their strengths, resiliencies, knowledge and the resources they access. The reviewed studies did all report on positive aspects of children's reported experiences, and one study, Moreno-Lopez et al., 2011, adopted a strengths-based approach by design, seeking adolescents' experiences of coping and accessing support after parental ABI. 39. Current scope of knowledge to inform TBI rehabilitation. The reviewed literature demonstrates a need for greater consideration of children as family members impacted by ABI within current rehabilitation practice policy making and research. Within New Zealand, current national policy in the form of TBI guidelines is guided by a participation model of practice and calls for practitioners to look at a person's potential to perform significant life roles, such as living independently, driving or returning to work, as well their ability to fulfill family roles and maintain personal, sexual and family relationships. ACC and New Zealand Guidelines Group, 2006, p. 70. The policy document also emphasizes the long-term strain that may be experienced by family members. However, it offers limited detail about the types of issues family and whānau may be experiencing or the types of support they may need in performing their roles, including parenting after injury. In contrast, the TBI guidelines offer clinicians more detailed information and recommendations in relation to pediatric patients and their family and whānau. The guidelines discuss the impact of the child's injury on parenting function and potential outcomes for the non-injured children within the home, i.e. siblings of injured child. From the findings of the reviewed literature, many of the highlighted issues for sibling children, e.g. emotional impact, experienced stress, caregiving and long-term impact related to parental availability, ability to work or relationship breakdown, would appear to also apply when it is the parent who is injured. Why the discussion is not extended to consider adults with TBI in parenting roles and their dependent children is not clear, but perhaps is reflective of greater tendency for family-focused models of research and practice within pediatric rehabilitation. The evidence reviewed suggests children are impacted by parental ABI, being at risk of their own adverse health outcomes and experiencing a wide range of emotions in processing the event and coming to terms with the impact of the injury on their lives. Qualitative findings provided insights into ways in which family relationships could be better supported to harness the potential for greater resilience, coping and mutual support available within families. Several studies emphasized the importance of ensuring children were included within discussions 40 about their injured parent and received appropriate information to support their understanding and coping. Harris and Stewart, 2006, Morena Lopez et al., 2011. As a whole, however, the sample of studies remains relatively small and heterogeneous, with research predominantly originating in Europe, with no studies from NZ, and few studies focusing specifically on children of parents with TBI as opposed to ABI. More broadly, acknowledging these limitations highlights a need for further research to support the development of evidence-based national policy and to guide rehabilitation practice with family and whānau. Summary. This chapter has offered a summary and appraisal of current evidence relating to children living in the context of parental ABI. The synthesis of study findings highlights that parental ABI impacts on children in the family, and yet, to date, there appears to be a very limited focus on children's experiences within rehabilitation literature. The current study aims to add to the evidence base to help inform policy design and guide practice. The following chapter, Chapter 3, Methodology and Methods, will discuss the study design, outlining the theoretical perspectives underpinning the research and the methodology and method selected to work with children in exploring their experiences of parental TBI. 41. Chapter 3, Methodology and Methods. This chapter provides an account of the theoretical, ethical and practical considerations that shape the current study. It opens with description of the conceptualization of childhood guiding this study. Then it describes the methodology used to explore children's experiences of living in the context of parental TBI, including the positioning of children as research participants. It then describes the methods used and offers an account of ethical decisions made. Conceptualizations of childhood. The current study was designed in accordance with contemporary conceptualizations of childhood, where children are recognized as active agents within their lives, who have the right to contribute to research on issues relating to their life experiences. Christensen, 2004, Christensen and James, 2008, Woodhead and Faulkner, 2008. This view reflects the shift away from research that positions children as the objects of study, of interest for their role as future adults, or human becomings, towards research for children and with children. This position recognizes children's status as capable subjects and already competent participants in their everyday worlds. Farrell, 2005a p. 6. Hood, Kelly, and Mayall, 1996. As such, childhood is acknowledged to be a unique period of life in its own right and is recognized to be neither fixed nor universal, but socially constructed and contingent on context. Balin et al., 2006, Christensen, 2004, Farrell, 2005a, Woodhead and Faulkner, 2008. Positioning children in this way raised a number of epistemological, methodological and ethical questions that needed to be considered in designing the study, which are made explicit in this chapter. Methodology. Interpreting children's stories. In alignment with the contemporary conceptualizations of childhood introduced, the study methodology was embedded in a social constructionist epistemology, Patton, 2002. This perspective discounts a belief in objective truth and instead assumes that seeking understanding of an experience relies on accessing the 42 meanings of an experience that have been constructed by a person and their interactions within their social world. Crotty, 1998. Accordingly, the study positioned children as the experts and gatekeepers of knowledge about their experiences and recognized them to be the best sources of information about themselves. Doherty and Sandalowski, 1999, p. 177. The study methodology drew On hermeneutics, using interviews to gather children's narratives about their experiences of parental TBI in order to explore interpretation and sense-making. From Children's Perspectives, Ellis, 2006, Van Manen, 1990. The search for meaning of a lived experience relies on interpretation. Drawing on what Van Manen, 1990, describes as the hermeneutic thrust of conversation, the research interviews were regarded to be a collaborative pursuit of sense-making and interpretation. The methodology was guided by the assumption that people often best reveal their sense-making and experience narratively. Ellis, 2006, p. 112, as it is through stories that people represent, and ultimately construct the realities of their lives. Reisman, 1993. Congruent with the epistemological positioning of the research, the search for objective truth of experience was not the goal. The study recognized that we do have direct access to another's experience and that narratives are not reflections of experience, but rather are constructions that are creatively authored, rhetorical, replete with assumptions and interpretive. Reisman, 1993, p. 5. The research process worked with the ambiguous representations of experiences attended to and told by the participant, which in turn were represented in transcription and analysis by the researcher and interpreted when read by the audience. Reisman, 1993. Accordingly, the findings produced through these representations reflect a co-constructed account of children's experiences of parental TBI. Children's participation in research and acknowledging children's roles as both experts and gatekeepers of their individual experiences, the study sought to address their rights as well as needs as active participants within research. 43. Research for children, supporting their right to be heard. Children are recognized as having fundamental human rights, which include the freedom to express their views and opinions, and be heard, on all matters affecting their lives. UN General Assembly, 1989. The reality, however, is that children are rarely given the opportunity to challenge decisions made on their behalf. Lansdowne, 1994, and research often fails to talk directly to children about the issues that affect their lives. Carter, 2009. Conducting ethical research with children is embedded within our understandings of children and childhood. Farrell, 2005 BP. 5. Traditionally, discourses have maintained a focus on the risks and vulnerabilities associated with children's research. Carter, 2009, Hood et al., 1996. The process of developing a study that aimed to engage with children and assumed their competency, agency and expertise did not diminish concerns for vulnerability, but rather served to extend the responsibilities I held as the researcher. Woodhead and Faulkner, 2008. As researcher, I needed to recognize children's position as research participants, with rights and capabilities. I needed to consider children's abilities and interests as participants alongside the context that informs their vulnerabilities in society. Children as research participants, same, but different. Respect for participants' unique status as children was considered a core aspect of study design. Children were regarded as capable of acting as reliable informants in the study and consequently shared similar needs and rights as adult participants. However, children are not adults and as research participants they have specific needs that relate to the context in which they live their lives, particularly in relation to issues of power and aspects of their culture. Mouthner, 1997, Morrow. 2005. Children's lives are shaped by dependency as well as agency and constrained by multiple contextual inequalities. Children are physically vulnerable due to the power that adults have over their lives and are also structurally vulnerable due to their cultural position in society that limits their civil status. Lansdowne, 1994. Equally, children form a distinctive social group and are more than the mere recipients of contextual influences, but are active in the construction and determination of their social lives. Irwin and Johnson, 2005, p. 821. They have 44. Their own interests and values, which are not necessarily harmonious with the adults in their lives. Hood et al., 1996, p. 118. As an adult researcher, I was positioned as an outsider to the child's life world and needed to recognize that listening to children is not the same as giving them true opportunities to be heard. Roberts, 2008. Explicit consideration of children's perspectives, values, abilities and interests was required to communicate in ways that not only matched the children's understanding, but also resonated, were sensitive and meaningful. Morrow, 2005. The research process represents a partnership between researcher and participant, whereby both partners have the potential to contribute to the generation and interpretation of data. Parental, 2005b. The inherent power imbalances that existed within the processes of data collection, interpretation and dissemination within the partnership between child, participant and adult researcher were acknowledged, and a process of meaningful reflexivity was required across all stages of the project to avoid the risk of overprivileging the adult perspective. Respect for children's competencies needed to become a methodological technique in itself. Morrow, 2005 p. 154. I was required to remain cognizant of my position and assumptions throughout the research process to ensure children were allowed to set their own research agenda and actually be heard. Respect for children and their rights and needs guided ethical and methodological decision-making in the study. A detailed account of the approaches adopted in relation to issues of consent, confidentiality, safety, privacy and practices of consultation is provided later in this chapter. See Ethics, section below, p.58. Speaking more broadly, however, ethical reasoning was regarded to be an active, ongoing process throughout all phases of the iterative design and implementation of the study. The study aimed to gain knowledge that could be of benefit to children and families who experience parental TBI in the future, and in doing so, sought to avoid any potential harm to those families who participated in the research. To ensure the principle of beneficence was upheld, careful consideration was given to establishing research conditions that provided for children's physical, emotional and psychological safety. Parental, 2005a. In order to ensure the study was appropriate for each child, the ethical design emphasized the need for flexible and responsive processes that could cater for the specific needs of the individual 45 participants and the potential for innovative and situational problem solving, when needed. G. Allen, 2005 p. 18. Such an approach aligned with the qualitative design of the study, as flexibility is regarded a necessity for data collection methods, whereby interviews are event and data-driven, as opposed to fixed prior to the beginning of a study. Doherty and Sandalowski, 1999 p. 178. Methods. The selection of appropriate research methods was guided by the overarching study methodology and informed by relevant literature. The study design was refined through processes of consultation, which provided specific guidance to support recruitment, data collection, analysis and dissemination. Research question. This study aimed to gain understanding of children's experiences when a parent sustains a TBI. The study sought to answer the research question, what are children's experiences of living in the context of parental TBI? Sampling children who had experience of parental TBI were purposefully sampled and were eligible to participate if they 1. Were aged between 7–11 years old at the time of the interview. 2. Had a parent who had had a TBI within the last 5 years. 3. Lived in the Auckland or Waikato region. 4. Were able, and willing, to communicate with a researcher, verbally in English, in a research interview. The definition of parent-child relationship was open to individual family whānau interpretation and as far as possible guided by the child's definition of their family whānau. As such, the parent was not required to be living in the same household as the child, nor required to be biologically related to the child to be regarded as parent to the child. 46. The rationale for the inclusion criteria was based upon the exploratory nature of the study and aspects of practical utility in terms of data collection. The decision to set a timeframe post-injury of 5 years was guided by the methodology, current evidence regarding TBI recovery and the age range of the children included within the study. Unlike positivist assumptions that emphasize the need for interviews to occur close in time to an event to ensure valid and reliable accounts, the study methodology emphasized the revisionist nature of stories and importance of passing of time to allow events to become storied. Doherty and Sandalowski. 1999 p. 181, Van Manen, 1990. Recovery and adaptation after TBI is increasingly recognized to be ongoing for years after injury. Powell, Ekin Wood, and Collin, 2007, and as such it was deemed appropriate to avoid setting a timeframe post-injury that would be too premature. The limit of 5 years was made on the basis that the study was situated within a rehabilitation context and interested in gaining insights into how children experience life after parental TBI. Therefore, factoring in the age range of participants, 7-11 years, a maximum of 5 years allowed children to have experienced life prior to parental injury. Initially this was paired with a minimum timeframe of 12 months post-injury, based on the assumption that this period would give children enough time to reflect on their experiences and have a story they wanted to share, and also be a time when more intensive periods of rehabilitation would have passed to avoid adding burden to families. However, after commencing data collection it appeared these assumptions were misleading, as in fact families expressed keenness to participate within the first year of injury and children had stories they wanted to share. Therefore, in consultation with the Ethics Committee, this minimum timeframe of 12 months post-injury was removed. And those interested families were invited to participate. Acknowledging the limited opportunity children have to contribute to research on topics impacting their lives, the study sought to prioritize the voice of children within this research, specifically younger children aged 7-11 years. The discourses of risk and vulnerability that have traditionally surrounded research with children are argued to have affected children's inclusion in studies differently. Carter, 2009. It has been suggested that older children, adolescents, are generally seen as more competent and therefore less vulnerable than younger children, and 47. Consequently more often included in research. Carter, 2009 p. 861. This bias towards representing the views of more adult-like children was seen within the small sample of studies looking at children's experiences after parental ABI discussed in the previous chapter, Chapter 2, Literature Review. Therefore, the study aimed to increase the representation of younger children's voices in research by designing a project that could take account of potential vulnerabilities, but also recognize competencies of younger children. The study purposefully sampled Patton, 2002, children aged 7-11 years who could offer new insights to develop the limited literature base on the topic of parental TBI. The study aimed to capture diversity of experience across the study sample and recognized that perspectives of children living in urban and rural communities may differ in experience. The study therefore extended the sampling area beyond the limits of the Auckland region, an urban area, to include the rural Waikato region. Due to the limits of the project budget, as a postgraduate master's thesis, it was not possible to travel further than these regions for interviews. The study methodology drew on hermeneutics and sought to explore children's narratives relating to their experiences of parental TBI. Therefore, children were required to be able, and willing, to verbally communicate with a researcher in an interview. While every effort was made to ensure that the individual needs of children were taken into account at each stage of the research, it was important that children were able to verbally communicate in order to be able to share their perspectives through the data collection process. Children were required to be able to express their preferences regarding participation, including offer their assent to be involved in the research and how they would like to take part, and needed to be able to talk about their experiences within the interview. Recruitment. As there are no specific support services in place for children living in the context of parental TBI within NZ, a range of recruitment strategies were required to identify potentially eligible participants for the study. Consultation with the Kawa Wakaruruhau Committee at the School of Clinical Sciences, AUT University, discussed further below, p.58, emphasized the 48. Importance of Whakapapa 2 and building upon existing research relationships within the TBI community to support engagement in the study. Therefore, the research was discussed within personal and professional networks within the community and through presentations about the topic. Support was received from a range of TBI service providers and advocacy groups who acted as recruitment localities for the project. In order to meet the goal of maximizing potential diversity of experiences, the study sought to include organizations who support people with different levels of classified TBI severity, e.g. outpatient concussion services, inpatient rehabilitation centers, and those who support people with different levels of ongoing impairment related to their injury, e.g. advocacy groups, community-based support services, residential services. The study also drew on established research relationships that had been developed through an existing research project, the TBI Experiences Study, ongoing in the Center for Person-Centered Research, which was analyzing longitudinal experience of recovery and adaptation after TBI. This recruitment strategy provided the ability to purposefully sample children toward the upper limit of the timeframe post-parental injury, who it seemed were harder to reach through formal support agencies, as service provision had since ended for the injured person. Families had opportunity to express an interest in participating in the study in a number of ways. Firstly, potentially eligible families were told about the research by recruiting localities and provided with a copy of the study leaflet. See Appendix B, Study Leaflet.